Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Black Men with Purpose podcast. For those of you joining us for the first time, it's a pleasure to have you with us. This is a safe space where we share our thoughts on a multitude of topics in hopes of helping Black males, young and not so young, overcome obstacles and challenges that can be hindrances to happiness, productivity, as well as success. We believe that through our experiences, successes, and failures, we can have some conversations that might help other Black males in their respective journeys through this thing we call life. On today, we are going to be continuing our Q&A, which we started on the last episode. So this will be part two of three parts. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into our first question for part two, which is how do you hold your brothers accountable? You wanna jump us off, Ray?
Yeah, I'll be more than happy to jump us off. Uh, to me, that's easy. That's an easy answer. We hold each other accountable by our actions. Like I said, I expected you guys from day one that if you saw me doing something that I didn't need to be, I wasn't supposed to be doing, if I was doing something that was contradictory to my what I'm always talking about, then I expect you to hold me accountable and say, hey, look, bro, you messing up, you're really screwing up. So for me, it's the same way. I can't go along with somebody else's BS if I think it's wrong. I've got to speak up and say something, even if it's going to. I make sure it's that whoever it is, knows it's coming from a place of love. It's not coming from a place of animosity. So for me, that's exactly how I do it. I just make sure that if I see something that I feel is wrong or something that's outside of one of my brother's character, then I'm going to make sure that I say something to them, because if not, that means I'm co-signing along with whatever the negative behavior is. But that's just the way I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I mean, there's not really a whole lot more to add. For me, it's just kind of being there as a support when necessary. Keeping it real with each other. Um, cheering them on when they need that, telling them when they might be wrong in a situation, being an ear, being there to advise, doing whatever's necessary, doing mental health checks. Um, you know, those sorts of things. But I think Ray pretty much covered it all. So again, there's not a lot more to add to that for
I
me.
would agree with that. I was thinking uh, one from a place of love, uh, and I say that because I always believe that especially when you're dealing with grown men, right, who have raised themselves to where they are, whether they're making good or bad choices, always coming from a place of love and genuine care. Uh, but it's I, I won't say that it's always easy because you never know how people are going to respond. And me personally, I never want to offend, especially one of my brothers. But I do think it's important to keep it real with them. So I would just say from a place of love and care, genuine care, and uh, and then just being present for them.
All these Negroes want to wax philosophical because they own the camera, man. These brothers is diabolical. I don't know. I think we exist in a different brotherhood because I be catching the brunt of it. No, I'm just kidding. But I like what Kevin said. I think that was important. I think that there's a lot more depth and breadth to accountability than just we kind of think of like checking and putting you back in place. But there's a meme on social media that says something that's very poignant to me, and it says it's not fair that you allowed me to laugh with you, but then you did not allow me the privilege of crying with you. And when you talk about that accountability, especially as men, black men, egos and pride, and that accountability of, hey, man, are you okay? Are you Are you doing okay? And we'll always say, oh, yeah, just got some things going on, but I'm all right, and that might not be the actual answer. And, I appreciate the fact that our brotherhood is strong enough where I think, we can read better. And I think there's that willingness to be vulnerable. But I think if you take that and spread that across men and more in, specifically Black men, I think it's important when you talk about that accountability to be accountable to your brothers and hold them accountable for being emotionally vulnerable. And, I think I did it's an empathy scorecard. One of the areas that I scored the lowest on was saying that there was something wrong with me and asking for help. So those were the areas that I struggled with the most. And I think sometimes we got to hold each other accountable. And again, like I said, I appreciate this brotherhood because we do a good job of that. But sometimes it's not just, hey, you did something wrong and I'm checking you. Sometimes it's be accountable to be honest about what you need and what you're going through because we can't do this alone.
Yeah, for sure. All right, question number 2. When you think of the current divide between Black men and women, especially on social media, in what ways do you think Black men in the podcast culture have contributed to that divide? That's a deep question, too. I've really just started hearing about some of this. I guess a lot of the folks that I follow, whether it be podcasts on social media or whatever, there's not a lot of that, but I have been hearing some things lately, um, with regards to that divide. You got some things going on with the Breakfast Club versus, some other people and things of that nature. Um, I'm not sure that I really know all of the answer to this, but just from the little bits and pieces that I have seen, and I could be off base here, but I think some of it has to do with the fact that we live in a day and age where I feel like Black women have really, really been taking, I can't even say taking back their power per se. They've been taking their power. And I don't know that it's so different than what what society is used to, I feel like. Um, and I'm not sure how well everyone's able to handle that. Um, and I think that's just a piece of it. I mean, they're probably the answer is probably very nuanced, and I think John can probably really speak to this a lot better than the rest of us. At least I think. But I think that's part of it. I also think that when we're talking about podcasts, right, and we talk about social media and things of that nature, we live in a world where, and this has been said by many people. Trevor Noah was the last person to really that I heard really talk about this a lot. But we live in this world of bites, right, of sound bites, and people don't necessarily know the full context of what someone has said or even done. And you see this little clip of something, and these sound bites are designed to make you react. And that's exactly what people do, unfortunately. Instead of going and really doing their research and homework and finding out what was said or what was done in totality, they take these sound bites and they run with it. And now all of a sudden there's a problem. And context matters. It absolutely matters. Context is everything, right? And you know you can't I don't feel like enough people, and I've said this many times too, on and off camera, but I just think that we unfortunately live in a world where people are lazy. Again, people don't get context and they just react to whatever, never going to do research, and they just run with things. And I think that, and I'm going to stop because I feel like in a way I'm just kind of rambling a bit, but I think that those things play at least a minor part of it. So.
I didn't gather my thoughts completely. But I think that this is a very pointed topic. And in fact, I think it was the other day. I think I had sent you something, that I ran across,
Yeah.
and it really it speaks to this idea of feminism. And I think a lot of that's being discussed uh, across the internet, across social media, uh, from different perspectives. And I'm not on social media necessarily, but I do hearken it back to conversations that we've had about how do we get to this place? Because I think here where we are, uh, black men and black women, uh, we have our own perspectives based on our own experiences, uh, exposure, what was poured into us. And yeah, we have an opportunity to form our own opinions and judgments now. Um, but I'm finding, and this is just my opinion, I'm finding that even when you put all that information into an individual, what comes out is still their own individual perspective. And what I mean by that is, you know, no matter what a woman or a man might go through, uh, they get information along the way, uh, they become an adult, and then based on the experiences that they have, the relationships that they have, it continues to shape and mold their perspective and their ideals about it. So this one is tough, but as I told Kev the other day, what I wish is that we could sit down, men and women, and just have a real conversation where everyone was locked into listening more than they speak, just to get an understanding, and then try and find out where that divide is, right? So I'll pass it on to Ray or John from there, because I think this is something that we could probably talk about all night.
Wow. Uh, and I'm on social media, but I'm not on it a lot. I mean, people might disagree with the amount of stuff that I post, that whether it's funny or um anti-conservative messages, or what have you. But for this one here, I'm looking at it from like the exploitation um piece. Where for years it seems like men were putting women up as um objects of desire, or pieces of meat, where now it seems like, with women getting more and more involved in social media, they're exercising their power to um put themselves out there how they want to be visioned. So I guess I would say they're tooting their own horn. Um, and I personally think some men don't like it. Where we're about empowering women, some men feel like, in my opinion, that a woman is there for a man's pleasure, a man's objectification. Um, Again, this is such a difficult topic for me to discuss. And I mean, I really don't even know where to go from there. I mean, I wrote this stuff down, and I still just can't formulate the words that I'm really trying to say. So I'm gonna pass it on to John, because I'm hoping that with him and having a lot more social media savvy, that he may have a better description.
Yeah, this could we can go deep. So I'll try to be real quick and simple. on my answer. So the format of the question is, it starts with the current divide between black men and black women, which there is a real divide between some black men and some black women. One of the things that I've noticed whenever you talk about a culture, or you talk about, especially when you're talking about the social media world, or you're talking about trying to get something public, usually it's the greasy wheel, or usually it's the squeaky wheel that needs the grease, So the louder voices aren't always the more numerous voices. And the one thing, especially when it comes to relationship success, people that are working on their relationship and trying to have the best relationship possible with their partners, black men, black women that are trying to do the right thing, they're not as loud as the people that push the divide and push the salacious narrative. So although I do know that there is a divide, there's parts of divides in this community. What I think when I think of the current divide, the first thing that I think about is that while it exists, I don't believe it to be as big of a problem as social media might make it seem. And the reason why I say that is because when you get on social media, to be able to get a following, you have to be able to talk about things that are drawing audience. And we've done these studies, there are plenty of podcasters and personalities in our community that are really worth following, but they don't seem to get the same draw as a World Star or a Shade Room or Spirit World or all of these other, purveyors of culture that'll put out wild things and debates and black men versus black women and black men ain't this and black women ain't that and Fresh and Fit podcast and, just all of these different things. So they do that so that they can get into the algorithm. They understand that they can monetize by being able to get that kind of conversation into the atmosphere. But when I think about podcast culture, I think sometimes we don't understand podcast culture as well as we should. I would say I'm exhibit A of not understanding podcast culture as well as I should, because I will look at a podcast that I like, black people, and be like, oh my God, whatever they're doing, they got the best podcast. But you know what the top 3 podcasts in the world are? Crime Junkie, Dateline, and another one called Smartless. These people ain't talking about relationships. They ain't talking about the divide between no black people. And these are the top ranked by views, monetization, and every other favorable metric. Those are the top podcasts in the world, but, we get a couple of brothers that get on a podcast and say, women are crazy and I'm sick of them, and fellas, you need to get your passport and go overseas. And they get 100,000, 1 million views. And I think sometimes because their voices are loud and angry and very, again, salacious, they get people riled up and in their feelings, we feel like that louder voice is the more prominent situation in the culture. So I do believe that it is hurtful to the divide because it amplifies the voices that profit off of the divide. Whereas there's so many other resources. Again, like I like to study people that are in good relationships, but that's not as fun as watching somebody go off on somebody on Jerry Springer show or, Maury saying you are not the father. That it's not as fun to do some real academic research about people that are having success in relationships. So I think the current divide exists. I do believe that we do kind of sensationalize it because of the attention that it draws to a platform. And I do believe that, although there are some podcasts that do well exploiting this divide, I've researched them, man. A lot of them don't even make the top 100, but they have loud voices in our community, and it's the ones that you see on the big platforms. So, I think that it's more of work that we've got to do internally and organically, and less of the job of podcasts and social media to fix it, but they are tools.
Question number 3. In the spirit of building greater bonds within our communities, in what ways do you feel this group has personally contributed to helping bridge the gaps between the older and younger generations?
And I would just speak for me individually. You know what I've attempted to do uh, is kind of stand in the gap between the older and younger generations. And, and when I say older, I'm thinking about the generation in front of me and the younger generation, because they literally are living in two separate worlds, seems like, and speaking totally different languages. Uh, and what I know I've tried to do, for instance, in trying to help young people, you know, understand the true need of that older generation that kind of paved the way for them to have, more of the freedoms and opportunities that they enjoy today. Uh, to almost, pay homage to that while they're here, give them their flowers while they're alive, help them to understand, while we might be different, different views and opinions, different perspectives, uh, uh, I appreciate, what you did so that I can enjoy the freedoms and opportunities that I get to enjoy. Same thing that I would want for, you know, my own offspring or the generation coming. It's not that you require it. It's just that it's always good when it's recognized that, yeah, I didn't get here by myself. Yes, I did the work, I studied, I worked hard, whatever it is, but to even get to the point where I could do that to move myself forward, there were some other things that other people did so that I could even enjoy that opportunity. Uh, so I would say that's one way that I've tried to help bridge the gap, because I will tell you, I've found, and this is just me, I've found, maybe it's just young people that I've had the experience of dealing with. Some of them, uh, they kind of in their own world, like like nothing was done to provide them those opportunities. They don't have necessarily have an appreciation for the fact that sacrifices had to be made, just like they had to be made for us.
So I agree with you, Rod. I think that that's important, to instill that whole, respect and appreciation for those who came before you and for paving the way. But at the same time, I also think that's part of the problem. And what I mean by that is the younger generations, when you think about millennials and Gen Zers, it's been my experience that their problem with being told that is it's like you want me to respect you or respect these older generations that you say have paved the way, but you're not in return giving me that same respect. Um, they feel like the older generations, and by older generations, I mean Gen X, baby boomers, traditionalists, um, they feel like the older generations judge them, misunderstand them, don't listen to them, don't respect them. And so, unlike my generation, Gen Xers, where you didn't have that option, there was no, oh, I feel disrespected, so I'm not going to respect you. That wasn't an option for us, right? It was, you're going to respect your elders. I don't care how you feel. Well, the younger generation, they don't roll that way. It's like, no, I don't care that you're 20 years, 30 years older than me. I'm not respecting you if you don't respect me. And so it's like, don't tell me to respect those ahead of me who paved the way if you're not going to try and even understand my perspective, if you're just going to say that I'm misguided and I'm lost, right? So they want, and I think that what I have tried to do, and I think what we do with this podcast is try to bridge that exact gap that exact gap that I'm referring to, right? We try to come at things from our perspective, but taking their perspective into consideration as well, whether it's speaking to commonalities or just letting them know that, hey, look, giving them some advice versus just trying to pound them with, hey, you need to respect this and you got to understand who came before you and all of this. Again, that's the gap that I think we are bridging, is having that understanding of each other. Hey, look, I know that I'm 20 years older than you, but I want to hear what you have to say, right? I want to listen to what it is you're saying. I'm truly listening, not just pretending to listen, but truly trying to listen and understand your perspectives and value and respect those perspectives as well. And I think that's what I try to do personally. And I think that's what we try to do with this podcast.
We evolved. That is the one thing that I could say, that we evolved. I know I personally have evolved. When I'm talking to folks, especially my daughter, I give her my past experiences, or I give these younger folks, this younger generation, my past experience. But I tell them, hey, look, this is coming from my perspective. I don't have your perspective. I'm not 27 anymore. I'm 56. I can't 100% relate to what exactly you're talking to. But this is how I've tried to handle things that may be something similar to what you are experiencing. And it's also by not being stuck in the past. And, I know my dad's generation, when I was talking to him before he passed, he would always tell me this is how we did things, back in my day or back in the day. And I also remember, while we were in the Air Force, how we used to really not like listening to the people we consider dinosaurs. They always did the same thing the same way, and this is how it's always been done, and they never wanted to listen to us when we had fresh ideas that may solve the problem that we may have been facing. So I try to do the same thing with the younger generation that's coming behind us, because again, I can't relate to exactly what they're going through, but I can give them my perspective. And like as you said, Kevin, I listen to exactly what they say, and all I can say is, hey, I'm just gonna give it to you from my perspective, and go from there. So
Man, Ray, I love that shirt you got on, man. LJ got one just like that too, man. I'm a fan of that shirt. What always trips me out is, and I know that the generations that preceded us probably felt the same way, man. But like, I'm always teasing about y'all are old and I'm the young one, but sometimes I had to sit down and really think, man. Like, I am not, like, maybe comparatively you could call me young, but there's not really any other metric by which I could be called young. and because I remember, sometimes I be having that feeling like, yo, man, where's the old school cats, man? I miss the old school cats. Be like, man, you are the old school cats. What are you talking about? So, I do I feel like I do a good job of bridging the gap because I hang out with y'all. You know what I'm saying? That's the old generation. I'm just messing.
Yet there's a lot of truth to that.
a whole lot.
I know you said it tongue in cheek, but yeah, that resonated with me. Just so that you know, brother.
No, man. I got a mentor. He works in the building, man. I call him my OG, and he's in his early 70s. And we started a thing that we do, man, and I really enjoy it. And it's called a wisdom meeting. So like when young men, we got the idea of, how in the Jewish culture, they do the bar mitzvah for young men, that are coming of age. And so basically what it is like during the birthday party, we just kind of call some adult men together to come and just kind of sit down and just share some wisdom, get a notebook or however they want to transcribe it. And we just kind of share some wisdom from either our career or our life or something that we've done to share with this young man as they start to transition into their journey And one of the things that's really important to me is, you know, maintaining my relationships with young men that I've mentored. And I've talked about that before. So it's just, but like to have these conversations and to, you know, sometimes be on platforms with them or podcasts or however we link up and work together and just build together. And it's just always crazy that, you know, I'm having this opportunity to work with this person that I remember them when they were born. Like, you know, I was a whole adult when you were born, and now you're an adult, and we here having a whole adult relationship. And I believe that goes far into building those bridges and bridging those gaps, because I think when I started to mentor and get into that, one of the biggest things is, hey, I'm not your uncle, I'm not your father. I am a voice and I am a presence here to guide you. But at the same time, I always felt like I had a responsibility to help them fill out the parameters of their adulthood and then growing up. So sometimes, you know, you let them be a little more grown and have a conversation with me that they may not have with their parents, you know, and kind of let them really flesh out how that feels. And I think, you know, for generations making space, like what Ray spoke to, you know, we come in and the dinosaurs wouldn't let us have our ideas. I always remembered that. So as a leader, I wanted to make sure that our youngest troops and everybody in between all the way through the spectrum had an opportunity to have their voices heard. So I think bridging that gap, having these conversations, but that real work of creating ways to bridge those gaps and making that something real in each of our personal lives. I think that's one of the ways that we, as a group, have personally contributed to bridge those gaps.
What do you think of the 50-50 rule? Do you think that's reasonable in today's economy, or should men pay 100% of the bills? You know, for me, I'm going to be pretty quick about this, and I'll be the first to admit that I'm not a fan of this question, quite frankly. And because it's, to me, I feel like it insinuates following the masses, right? Or some sort of societal norms. You just have to live your life, right? What rule, 50-50 rule, what is that? What works for you and your partner? That's all that matters, right? Y'all make decisions based on what works for you, period. It doesn't matter what anyone outside of your relationship thinks. If what works for you is she pays 100%, okay. If y'all switch it up, if there's a joint account, it does not matter what anyone else thinks. What works for you? Stop trying to follow the masses and try to follow societal norms. That's going to only get you in trouble and cause heartache. Do what works for you, period. End of story.
I agree with you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Uh, the only difference for me, and like you said, it's based on your household. You know, financially, in my house, my wife and I split everything. But when it comes time to pay the bill, I pay it. You know, I just took the responsibility of, okay, if this is due on the first, this is due on the 15th. If I don't have it on auto pay, you know what? I pay it, and then she reimburses me, or we go put the money in the joint account, whatever the case may be. But I'm in 100% agreement with you, Kevin. Whatever is best for your household, that's what you go with. You know, I wouldn't follow societal norms, and that's the way we decided to do things in our home, and it works out for us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in agreement that, you know, uh, couples should do what works for them. Uh, and what works for them, you know, might differ from relationship to relationship if they're, you know, uh,
Yep.
dealing with someone differently. Again, you know, it all goes back to me is that, you know, everyone's relationship with money or finances is different. And, you know, when you decide to come together into a partnership, relationship, marriage, whatever it is, you know, you bring that with you. And then that's your starting point, right? So, and then from there, you determine what works for you all. Uh, and so I would just add to that, you know, even though this is not necessarily a question, but just to provide perspective from myself personally. I have typically been a traditionalist in my thinking. And maybe that speaks directly to the generation I come from and my age. But that's just me. And I am okay with that traditional role if that happens to be, what we agree upon, right? So, but I'm also okay otherwise. I am certainly never one to want to, let finances get in the way of that. Yeah, I'm certainly not living to have any issues surrounding money.
Yeah. Right.
That's just not me. So that's my perspective.
So I got two goals. One goal is on the next question. I'm gonna get in before I have to be the last one. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to play cleanup. And then my second goal, man, I want to get like y'all fellas, man. I want to live where money ain't an issue. That's why I don't date, man, because broke boys shouldn't date. But it costs money to have a woman. I'm a very traditional man, not in a forceful way, but like I totally agree with Rod. Like I totally agree with Ali. I think in a relationship, it should be everything you've got to make the relationship work on both sides. Not a 50-50, not a number, but everything you've got. And as a man that leans toward the traditional, I take pride in creating a safe space for the woman I'm with, emotionally, physically, financially, because of the value of allowing her to operate in her femininity. But, just like Rod said, just like all of us have said, people have to do what works for their relationships, and if splitting the bills and y'all are just happy and thriving, then man, split them bills. Go on, split them bills. If the woman, like if I'm not gonna call no names because people be looking at me crazy. Let's just say I was able to pull me a real rich woman that had a different lifestyle. Obviously, she gonna be pulling more of the financial. She a multi-millionaire. She gonna be pulling more of the financial, weight than I am. But I will still learn how to be a man in that that construct. And I think people need to make sure. It's like how Kevin opened it up, man. People just want to argue. They want to have a conversation, man. Why are you talking about 50-50? It's none of your business what other people do in their relationship. They could get together, decide they ain't gonna pay none of their bills and get evicted. That's their business. None of your business. Like,
right.
That's one of those classic. What I eat does not make you go to the bathroom.
Absolutely.
So those are my thoughts.
All right, number 5. Discuss one trait about yourself that you love. You're gonna fulfill that.
I was gonna say, go ahead, John.
You put yourself out there.
There's no universe where I said I wanted to go first. See, y'all talking about holding accountable, and then here we are on the screen. I'm getting bullied for everyone to see. This is gonna go into perpetuity. When I tell you they bullies, y'all will see this. Exhibit A. They treat me. Deserve to be treated better than this.
Give the brother what he asked for.
Yeah,
I said I didn't want to go last. I never said I wanted to be first.
Well, where we come from, going first is not going last, right?
Going first, going second, or going third is not going last, sir.
To use your own words, we gave you the ways and means to fulfill your hopes and dreams.
Let me remove him from the screen. I'm not going to deal with that kind of behavior. How dare you talk? How dare you talk to the producer like that? Shame on you. One trait about myself that I love is my tenacity. I got this hard headedness about doing things, you know, and it's just like a case in point. I think it's something I love about myself because I've learned to value it. You know, so where I live, we got the smart locks, and there was an issue with my smart lock. And before I call maintenance on anything, which, you know, this kind of community, I should be able to snap my fingers if maintenance get here, but nonetheless, that's neither here nor there. But I decided I wanted to kind of figure out some things that are going on with the smart lock or whatever. And I ended up troubleshooting it and fixing the problem myself. Not because I was afraid to call maintenance or that I want to. I was just curious. I wanted to know how it works. And a lot of times when it comes to learning things or when I get into it, I just kind of get to the point where I kind of want to figure out how this works. And I'm not going to give up on it until I've tried everything in my power to figure out how to fix it, how it works, how to make it happen. You know, I've done that in several things post-retirement. I did that all throughout my career. And I used to just say, hey, man, I'm hard-headed. I need to figure that out. But, you know, as I've gotten older, I recognize that's a trait, you know, that I'm willing to see things through, even through the hard part, because I'm curious to see what the end is going to look like. And so I think that that's a trait about myself that I really love.
Wow. The one trait I love about myself is also the same one that I hate about myself. And what that is I tend to put the needs of everyone else ahead of my own. If someone is in need of time, if someone is in need of money, if someone is in need of help, I will stop whatever it is that I'm doing to make sure that I help that person. And to my own detriment at times, I have recognized that, and realized I had to stop doing that. But that's still a trait that I love about myself, is that I'm willing to help someone when I see that they need help. So again, for me, I love it and I hate it about myself. But that's the one trait that I would talk about.
Wow. So I guess the trait that I trait about myself that I love uh, would be the measure of my heart and understanding that. And so to define that better for those that might be listening, it's that I recognize that no matter what, I am truly a live and let live person through and through. Uh, and for me, it provides a level of centeredness that I believe serves me well. So, so that would be the trait that I love probably most. I'm not gonna be angry, you know, for no extended period of time anyway. If I were to get angry, which I'm not sure that that's you know serving, but yeah, just want to live and let live.
And I feel like following Ray and Rod. Mine sounds more self-serving, but I've always had this ability, always, for as long as I can remember, to set a goal and accomplish it. Um, even as a kid, I mean, I think back to, you know, knowing that I wanted to get out of the hood, right? I knew that wasn't it. That wasn't the life I wanted to remain in, and I knew there had to be a way out of that. And I going in the military and just everything that every pretty much every goal that I've set in my life, I've done what was necessary to accomplish it. Now, that doesn't mean I haven't had failures along the way, right? I mean, you can't succeed without failure. So yeah, I've had some failures for sure, but all of my goals, and I've had to pivot at times as well. But yeah, I've had this kind of innate ability to accomplish anything that I set my mind to do. So I think that would be the thing for me. Question 6. Considering today's political climate and what's taking place in Ukraine and Israel, would you advise your children to join the military or steer them in another direction?
Well, I'll jump in here since my answer will probably be real short. I personally wouldn't steer them at all. I think the conversation I would have though is for them to consider their own values uh, and belief systems, to encourage them to be a learner. I mean, a lover of knowledge and information, by which then they can make a better informed decision about what they ultimately decide to do with their lives. Uh, I think that, you know, there's some very basic things uh, that they could evaluate that the idea of serving within the military against, right? And so, and I've had to learn that, you know, I'm very proud of having served. Uh, and, but I wouldn't want that to be, you know, any weighted factor in what they chose to do. So I would just encourage them to do that. But I certainly would not steer them or advise them uh, either way, right? Because, you know, as Kev said earlier, you know, young people they think differently, and you know, and they and I think they want the ability to make up their own mind about things. And all we can provide is the wisdom of our experiences and things to consider learning about before making such what could be a life altering decision. So,
Look at me. I'm not last. I'm second. Um, I think without even before the consider, you know, as military members, we know that there's always been a political climate and conflict. Like, you know, I think we've just gotten to a point now where the general public is a little bit more aware of what we were doing. But I don't think there was ever a point where I would advise or steer my children into the military. There's a part of me that is of the opinion that I did all this so you ain't got to, because, you know, to be 100% honest, you know, like people, I always appreciated the thank you for your service and all that, but it wasn't no G.I. Joe, real American hero type biz I was on when I joined. It was definitely a financial and life decision that I made. Like,
Absolutely.
I wasn't going nowhere in life, and I needed to find a way to get me out of the circumstances I found myself in and getting me away from my local area, you know, and so that was, you know, a lot of it. So if I did have a conversation pertaining to military service, obviously I wouldn't restrict, but we'd have a conversation about how to leverage your experience and how to leverage, you know, going in there. You know, if they were just dead set on it, I'd be like, hey, do these things. Let's get you through school. That's why your dad served. So, you know, now we can get your school paper. Let's get through your school, man. Maybe try to get you in as an officer or whatever. But I definitely wouldn't steer them towards, because in my perspective, I feel like I've served that's not necessarily a legacy that I would be proud if they did it and, you know, was successful and all that, as any parent would. But for me, that's not my dream for that legacy to continue, because I'm painfully aware of, you know, I'm proud of my service and proud of, appreciative of everything that I experienced and what I was able to get from the military. But I'm also painfully aware of what it took for me. And I wouldn't want to just put my children in a situation like that just because of my own personal experiences. But again, I would not restrict them from doing it. I'm just saying, hey, we need to have a conversation about leveraging, you know, your experience and your expectations when we go in there. We're going to put you in a position to win as much as possible. I ain't going to just send you first thing smoking like me. You know what I mean? So, you know.
I think they were both really good responses. I would say for me, what Rod said regarding steering or advising them, I've learned over the years that the best thing to do is to let them make their own decisions, right? You guide them in the best way that you can. Try to give them any advice that you possibly can, to help them make their decision, especially if it's something that you've dealt with yourself. You provide them all of the information and tools and all of that. But ultimately, they have to make that sort of decision on their own. But I also agree with John in the sense of, if you were to ask this question a different way, if you were to say, considering the political climate, whatever, would you want your child to join the military? Now, that's a different story. What I want? No, absolutely not. I'll be perfectly honest with that. And it has a lot to do with what John said. I joined out of necessity, right? If I wanted to get out of Newark and do the things that I knew I could do, accomplish those goals that I talked about being able to accomplish, considering my socioeconomic status, right? That was the only way. The military was the only way for me to be able to do what I wanted to do and have done, in life. But that's not the case for them, right? I served, did what was necessary so that they wouldn't have to. And so, would I want them to? No, I wouldn't. And that's not to say that I regret my time. It's not like I'm like, oh my God, the military is so horrible. I am who I am in large part due to my time in the military. But again, no, I wouldn't advise or steer them either way, but I wouldn't want them to. And that's not just because of the political climate either. I mean yeah, I mean, of course that plays a part, but that's not the only reason. There's a lot of things that go into it. So
Or um, one thing I said, or I would say, is that the decision is theirs. Whether it's either my girls. I was just talking to a friend's daughter last week, and this young lady has 4 degrees and was looking at going in as an enlisted person. I stopped her and said, "You are crazy if you do that." But it was also because the recruiter was trying to put the pressure on and say, "Well, I think you should don't go this way and work your way up." No, what I did, and what I do with any of, whether it's my kids or anyone else's kids, I give them, I try and give them the pros and cons. Again, based off of my experience. Here's what I experienced. This is where it was good for me. This is where it wasn't so good for me. This is what I wish I would have done differently while I was in. But I would give them, basically, here's all the pros, here's some of the cons, and ultimately the decision is yours because, as we've all said, I did my time. I did my 25 years, 9 days. I'm proud of it. I would do it again if I had to. I wouldn't do it today because, especially having gotten older. Well, I don't know, this doggone mouth of mine would keep me in trouble, but that's okay. But yeah, I would say the decision is theirs, and I would never, like Rod said, I would never steer them to go one way or the other. But let's say, here's all the information that I can give you as someone who has served, and if you decide to go, great. If you decide not to go, that's fine too.
what advice would you give to someone who is just starting out, i.e., high school, college graduates, new to the military, new parents, etc.? For me, I'll be kind of quick about this. There's probably a million things I could say, and I'm sure the three of you will have great things, as well. The first two things that just jump out to me right away, and after I say them both, I probably think of two or three other things right behind it. But the first thing I'll say is almost that same thing that I said about that 50-50 rule question. Um, do you, right? Do what works for you. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Um, uh, I think the older I've gotten, the less I've cared. Um, and Rod would probably argue that I never cared what other people thought thought anyway. But certainly the older I've gotten, the less I care about what other people think. And I'm not talking from a standpoint of people giving me advice. I mean that I'm, of course I care about that, constructive criticism even. But I'm talking from the standpoint of criticism, jealousy, hate, all those sorts of things. You just can't worry about what other people are saying or doing. Do you do what works for you, and keep it moving. And then the second and last thing I'll say is to guard your thoughts. Your thoughts shape your life. Everything starts with a thought, which impacts your feelings, that impacts your actions, and ultimately your results. So if you're not happy with the results in your life, you have the power to change everything simply by changing your thoughts. So ensure you guard your thoughts. And that's it for me.
To thyself be true.
Absolutely. I love it.
You know, I think that's probably the best piece of advice that someone could have given me as a young person, starting out. No matter what journey you're on, or what direction that you're headed. Uh, I would say one, to thyself be true, and secondly, uh, never think that taking the shortcut is beneficial for you. Taking a shortcut is not necessarily beneficial for you, because I think when you're spending that effort and energy on trying to find a shortcut, you miss out on a lot of things that you can learn along your journey that will help make you the best possible version of yourself. Uh, and and then thirdly, as far as uh, parenting and all, uh, I would say accept the responsibility and the fact that this human life that you're now going to be responsible for, it isn't a 2 week commitment or 2 year commitment or it's 1 year commitment. It's a lifetime commitment. No matter how you're built, you're gonna always be a parent once you help procreate. So be committed.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I agree to an extent, obviously. Well, no, not to an extent. I agree. And I will add my personal nuance to it. Just somebody just starting out, especially with the first ones, because obviously being a new parent is a little bit different. Like one of these kids is doing its own thing, like starting a high school graduate, a college graduate, new to the military. Those are definitely different from being a new parent, So you anchor them a little differently. But in all of them, I would definitely say, really, figure out what it is that you desire or you want from this opportunity, this experience. And, to reiterate that, be true to yourself. And for the graduates and new to the military, I would really emphasize the fact that you're at the beginning of a journey. Don't rush yourself. Don't just create these narratives or these timelines for yourself, and that's one of the things that I really appreciate about this generation. We grew up in and it might not have been for all of us, but we grew up in man, you get 18, you got to do something, and you got to go to college. I don't even know who I am, but now I got to be on the hook for almost 6 figures worth of debt going to college, or I got to go, figure this and figure that out. So for my graduates and new to the military, be like, make sure you spend some time figuring out who you are. You're still early in your life. There's still a lot of life, ahead of you. So don't get caught up in you need to be in some situation. Be fully aware and immersed in every opportunity, and apply yourself as you see fit. But be present, be mindful. For new parents, I would definitely say, hey, it's gonna be a lot of times where you feel like you're getting it totally wrong, man. Just show up. then I don't really think you get to a point where you think, man, I am really parenting the parent out of this. Like, you don't really get it. Ain't like, playing basketball and your shot is falling. I don't think it ever. You have your moments where you're like, oh, I'm proud, but when you're in the midst of it, it's just gonna be. So give yourself a ton of grace, vulnerability. Make sure you have a circle. I tell men this all the time. When your wife, your woman has a baby, people are going to forget that you exist. Don't take that personally. Everybody going to always ask you how the mama and how the baby is doing, and nobody's going to ask you how you doing. So find you some people that care about how you doing, but don't take that too personally either, because, everybody feel like you didn't really have much to do with it. And in a sense you didn't, but still. So that would be my advice.
John, when I tell you, man, you need to trademark that saying. You could have stopped with that when you said you're gonna feel like you're not getting it right. Just continue to show up. You got to trademark that. That's a saying right there. That's a quote, because that's facts.
That's
Absolute
life.
facts. You
Yes,
just got to
sir.
show up, because sometimes it's like, man, that's all I can do is show up.
Right.
And you know what?
100% right on
Yeah,
that.
and that's true. Like even in relationships or marriage,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
and quite honestly, I think that's the thing that we don't get enough, or that we have not embraced enough. Hey, you might not be getting it right, but keep showing up.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely trademark that, John. That's
Yeah, no
deep,
doubt. In all facets of life.
wow.
Yeah.
And that's John Singletary from 25 years ago with that, right? Who knew, right? That's my brother there. Yeah, good stuff, man.
Love it.
Y'all see how they do me? Y'all see how they do me?
It's all out. It's all out of love, though, John. It's all out of love. Hey, y'all really didn't leave any meat left on that bone, man. I'm gonna see if I can find a couple feathers here, but there ain't nothing left. Rod really took it over when he said, to thy own self be true. I mean, 'cause the one thing I wrote down, and it goes right to that: do what you love. Find what you love and do what makes you happy. Someone that's fresh out of high school, college graduates, new to the military. The only thing I can say is, don't waste your money, invest it, save it. And especially when it comes to parenting, and I'm still learning this, it way late in the game, but there is no manual. There is no manual when it comes to parenting. And John just said these words: give yourself some grace. Ask for help, because there's still days where I'll call my mom and be like, hey, well, I know I was a piece of work, but how did you handle me when I did this or when I said that? And my mom will give me, still give me some tidbits, and I try and talk to other folks that are parents. Ask for help, because again, there is no manual when it comes to parenting.
There's a that can almost be, well, I don't know if it could be a whole episode, but man, that John just made me think about it when he said it, and then Ray reiterated it. That whole grace thing, man, there's just really something to that, and I wish people were better. I wish I was even better sometimes at granting grace, not only to myself but to others. I'm better, without a doubt. I'm much better than I used to be. But man, we truly, yeah.
Hallelujah. Thank God. He is real.
Praise him.
Oh, man.
Praise him.
Oh man. Man, I think the problem with grace, and I'm not going to harbor on this because I know this isn't part of the questions, but I read something one time where someone talked about they kind of related that to the Bible, and I kind of want to do that same thing, right, with grace. I think grace is something, unfortunately, when you think about grace, I think it's something that people can only deal with in hindsight, but not in real time, right? When you think about it, you still read the book of Psalms, right? After David slept with Bathsheba, got her pregnant, had her husband killed, right? And then married her as his eighth wife. You still read the book of Peter after he denied Jesus 3 times, but something that's happening in real time, you can't grant grace for. It's almost like, again, it's something that grace and humanity can, it's something that's done in hindsight with no problem. And I think we have to get so much better at being able to do that in real time. And that goes for me as well. I'm not just saying for you or other people, whatever, but for me as well. I think we really have to be better at granting grace. So I'll leave it at that.
Touche. Agreed wholeheartedly.
When did you consider yourself a success? Who said we do?
Yeah, really.
Wow.
Well, I guess I'll jump on that. You know, for me, I think if this question would have been asked some years back, my answer would have been much different. And I talked about that last week, and that whole thing about climbing a mountain to be seen versus to see out. And I think earlier, for a lot of years of my life, I was probably doing it more to be seen than to see out, honestly. And but no, I see success now, and I quoted this in the last episode as well, right? Albert Einstein: strive not to be a success, but rather to be a value. And to me, that's what success is all about. Obviously, everybody has their own definition of success, but to me, I guess I consider myself successful because I've learned to really be, well, I think for the most part, I've always kind of been a bit intentional about personal growth and development. But over the years, I've become more and more and more and more intentional about that. Pushing myself outside of my comfort zone, taking on new challenges in order to set an example for young Black men in our community, for my kids, for whomever, right? And to me, those sorts of things, when you are just constantly trying to improve yourself both personally, professionally, however, and in whatever way, and striving to be the best version of yourself, for me, and being very intentional about that, that's what success is for me. So I think I would call myself successful because I try to do all of those things on a daily basis.
So real short, I would consider success as being able to positively impact and or influence the things and the people that you care most about. And that doesn't place upon you any need to be a millionaire or any need to make 8 figures. Because I think as you get older, you learn uh, the true value of money versus the true value of how you spent your time and the impact that you had with that. So I would just say to anyone, you know, when did I consider myself successful? It's when I understood how I was able to positively impact and influence those around me and those within my community.
For me, I think I think it's definitely a retroactive thing, man. And I really I think it would be really helpful if we were able to sometime, because I think we're all a group of men that are driven. We always see what the next thing is. We're always working, whether it's personally, professionally, wherever, to be better and to improve ourselves. And, I think for us, it would be a beautiful thing if we could kind of see those parameters of success in real time. And I think we have in some cases, but I think sometimes we were outstanding successes and we didn't realize it because we were just in the midst of it, doing what we do, trying to be the best possible versions of ourselves. And so for me, I definitely think that it was a retroactive thing. It was a one day looking back and saying, hey, I have contributed these positive things to the lives of others, to the world. I've left an imprint. I've left a legacy to where there could be qualitative things said about me when I'm gone. And when did I have this moment? Man, it was probably shortly after I retired, and I was talking to someone. They asked me what I did, and I was telling them I was retired. And I guess I didn't say it like, yeah, I'm retired from the Air Force and I did this and that. I kind of said it like retired, like, hey, I ain't doing nothing. And I think they sensed that I was bringing that energy, and they were like, man, that's awesome. You retire, you young, and you this, that, and the other. And I was like, man, you're right. I need to kind of say that with my chest puffed out. And so we kind of went through the conversation a little bit more. And they kind of asked me what I did. And, I tell people all the time, you be wanting all these promotions, but I promise you, that gets to a point like, we got promoted and it was such a big deal to make it to master. But after a while, you were just a master sergeant. And then it was such a big deal to make it to senior. But after a while, you were just a senior master sergeant. And as crazy as it sounds, we made it to chief. But after a while, we were just a chief. Like it just was. You know what I mean? So, and I started talking about it and watching them respond as I ran my resume upon request, obviously, and just to have that feedback reflected to me. And I was like, I have done some impressive things. And so, yeah, it was a retroactive thing for me, certainly.
Real quick, you make a good point, John, because as you were saying that, and especially, after you make a grade or rank and you realize that, it was just that, and then it's on to the next thing.
Yep.
And then when you get to a point where there's no next thing as far as a grade or a rank, then you realize that, wow, so success is not really in the value of that grade or rank or obtaining that thing or attaining that thing. It's really in the value of what you do, given the position and the opportunity that you have to influence and impact others. So that was a great point. I never ran through it like that, but again, Brother Singletary to the rescue.
And to both of your points, actually, very, very accurate and valuable. And to both of those points, it's really, I think, to sum it up, both of you kind of said it, right? It's probably more about the journey or the process than it is actually attaining whatever that thing is. And I think you can actually say that for anything in life, which is why I think it's important to enjoy the journey and the process as you're going through life, because there's always going to be that next thing, right? Whether it's a goal or rank or whatever, and you get there and you're like, okay, well, now what? So if you're not taking advantage and enjoying the process and the journey itself, you're never going to truly be able to appreciate what's going on because there's always going to be another thing. So.
And conversely to that, I think that also in lies the problem with those within the rank or government structures that believe that they've arrived once they attain that grade or that
right,
because that's all it's about for them, and it's not about the impact that they have on the people that they have an opportunity to impact.
And they learn the hard way because they can see them people looking in their eyes and saying, this leader sucks. Like, as selfish as they are, I know they go home and they feel that. I have no doubt in my mind that they realize that they're terrible. So,
yeah.
But they're not going to turn that check down, though. They're going to keep collecting that check.
and they're going to continue with their bad behavior. That's the other problem, right? So.
Yep.
I considered myself a successor was two things, and the second one was after John said something. The first time I really considered myself a success was when I was at my retirement ceremony, and afterwards talking with my parents, and both of them telling me as an adult man, as someone who was retiring as a senior master sergeant, that they were proud of the man I had become. I never let myself be called, and I never called myself by my full first name. And I know Kevin heard this story because he was there. I never introduced myself as Raymond. I never allowed anybody to call me Raymond because that was my dad. And my dad had a whole other list of successes that I just felt like I had a hard time living up to. But the first time that when my parents told me at my retirement ceremony that they were proud of the man I had become, that was when I really considered myself a success. And then, out of the four of us here right now, I'm the only one that retired as a senior. You guys retired as chiefs. But the second thing, like I said, this goes back to what John said, was when I had one of my troops write in my congratulatory retirement card, he called me Chief Butler. And that told me that I had a positive impact on my troops. And I said, I must have done something right. So those two things, same day is when I really considered myself a success.
And this will be our last question for this episode, and we'll finish up the rest of them in the next. But what mistake or mistakes did you make that you learned the most from?
And quite honestly and real succinctly, it is not being true to myself. Plain and simple, which is why it's so important that I think people are true to themselves. But it wasn't until I became an older adult that I recognized that I was compensating for my lack as a kid or a younger person, meaning that, I was quite honestly just always a people pleaser because I wanted to see that positive impact reflected in how they responded to my behavior, my words, what have you. The thing that kept me from going to the principal's office when I was in grade schools because, I didn't want my mother to be inconvenienced by having to come to the school or the fallout from having to do that. but that was always my motivation, was to please others. And with that, I learned that I sacrificed a lot of myself and a lot of growing that I needed to do. So
Guess I'll go. Lord, which mistake do I want to reference? I guess it was a series of mistakes, but the culmination was, my mom seeing me get arrested, and how much that disappointed her, right? And obviously, I didn't get indicted or eventually charged, but I did get arrested, and I wasn't guilty of what they said I was, but I deserved it. I was being foolish and dumb and stupid, and knowing that she had been in prison and like the changes she made in her life to try to keep me from following in her footsteps, and just how much that disappointed her. So I'll never forget, man, coming home one night. Oh man, I was drunk and I was high. And I walked in my room and I walked by my mom's room, man, and she was on her knees praying. And it was like God spoke to me and said, "Hey, fool, she praying for you." So the next day, I called the recruiter. Obviously, I told him I needed about 30 days before he sent me the MEPS, clear some stuff up out my system. But, and that mistake propelled so many other positive, and I just got on here talking about how I wouldn't need kids to military service, blah, blah, but, it really took my life on a different trajectory. And so I think that was a mistake that I learned a lot from, and that it put me in position to learn from. So
That's a tough one, man. It really is, because in some ways I feel like John, like, man, where do you begin with that, right? I mean, in some ways, I want to say I've made a ton of mistakes in my life, but then on the other hand, I want to say really none of us have made any mistakes in life when you think about it, because a mistake is something you can't come back from, right? Like death. We're still here. So, quite frankly, anything that we've done that would be deemed a mistake is something that needed to happen, right? To help us grow and get
we
where we needed to
learned,
be.
yeah.
Right. And so it's hard to really call it a mistake, but at the same time, I get what the question is, and I get all that. And there have been many things. I, the one that I'm going to say sounds like a cop out in some ways, because I can't, I don't know really which one to go with. There are a lot of things I think I could go with, but I had a lapse in, we've been talking, the reason I'm even thinking about this is because we've been talking about leadership in these last handful of questions. And so I had a lapse in leadership toward the end of my time at the Guard Bureau. I was burned out. I was completely burned out and was being treated like absolute crap um, by our commander at the time, who you all know. And of course, I'm not going to say any names, and I don't harbor any ill will, by the way, for anyone. I, no ill will here. I'm just talking about the situation, but was being treated like absolute crap. I was burned out. Didn't know if I was going to retire. I was a senior at the time. Didn't know what was going to happen, and I was just. And so I was recruiting. I was supervising the recruiters at recruiting school at the time, and I really, that's the one time in my life where I just was not a good leader. I was burned out going through things. Not that that's an excuse at all. I still should have been able to do what I needed to do as a leader. But those things that were going on, they were really weighing on me heavy, and I just was not doing my job in the way that I should have been. Um, and once that situation finally came to an end, I apologized to them. Fortunately, they had so many bad leaders in there. Well, I shouldn't say fortunately. Fortunately for me, I guess. Unfortunate for them, they had so many bad leaders that they still thought I was one of the best leaders that they had. But I told them, I was like, I didn't do half of what I needed to do for you all. Um, and in that, I was determined that, as a chief, I'm going to make sure that nothing like that ever happens again. And if I ever get to a point where I feel burned out, or I feel like I cannot take care of the troops appropriately, it's time for me to go. It's time. It's time to go at that point. I will never put myself in that situation again where I feel like I am not doing my people a disservice. Because going back to what you said, John, during that period of my career, I had that. I exactly what you said. I went home at nights and I knew, I could look in the mirror and knew I wasn't living up to what I needed to be as a leader. I knew it. I knew it. And I didn't like it. I didn't like it. But I was going through some things and couldn't figure out exactly how to get out of that rut. And so fortunately, that me being that kind of leader where I just wasn't fully present and doing what I needed to do for them didn't last very long. I mean, we're not even, we're talking 6, 8 months, which is too long, but still. Um, but again, what I learned from that was to never put myself or put anybody else in that situation again. And I didn't. And when I got to a point as a chief, that point did come where I felt like, you know what, I'm just not feeling this anymore. I moved on. I didn't hesitate to move on. So
Yeah, like we've all said, where do I begin? Um, the one thing I will start here is I will say, the one there was a series of mistakes, but none of them weren't something I couldn't overcome, and none of them had to get as serious as they gotten if I had asked for help. Um, whether it was financial, um, parental advice, whatever it was, I was, because I was out on my own, I figured, you know what, I just have to work my way through it, and um, it'll get better. And because I didn't ask for help, it took longer than what it should have. So that's one thing I would say. But then I'm gonna tell this one real quick because my mom would enjoy this one. Thinking I was grown when I wasn't, because there was something that my mom had told me that, or my dad had told me that he told me to cut the grass. And my mom came home from work and I hadn't cut the grass yet, and it started getting dark. And she said, "Didn't your daddy tell you to cut the grass?" I cut it when I feel like it. I don't know what happened. All I remember is I had my mom, who's 5'4", and at the time about 120 pounds, wrapped around my back with her hands around my arm around my neck, choking the life out of me. And she told me, "Get your A outside and get that grass cut." And I jumped down a flight of stairs. And when my dad came home, it was pitch black, and I was outside on a ride mower driving that doggone thing around, cutting the grass. So I know my mom will get a chuckle out of that, because I said, if nothing else, I realized at 16 and 6'3", I wasn't grown. I was still a child, and my mom was gonna kill me. And that was the last time she had to worry about me talking back to her. So that's the last thing, and what the big lesson I learned from a mistake I made by running my mouth.
Good
So,
stuff. We will finish up in our next episode with our Q&A. But with that, we want to thank each of you for taking the time to join us as we wrap up this week's episode in talking about To Thine Own Self Be True. We want to leave you with a quote from philosopher, abolitionist, and poet Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, "To be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else is the greatest accomplishment." Until next time, peace.